Well, it's Trevor's illness. It's back again. We need money for another treatment for him.
Why not use his college fund? It's clear that he won't need it now.
We did. After you left, we were forced to start working multiple jobs, and even with his college fund, we barely are able to make enough to pay all of our bills.
And how is that my problem? Because we're family and we really need you. Well, that's just it. You may need me, but I 100% do not need any of you. If you don't help us, we will disown you. And just like that, I turned and left. Hi there, my name is Kevin, and I may have done something a bit greedy and wrong, but the tragedy is that I don't even care. Let me explain what I mean, and then you can tell me if what I did was justified. You'll probably not agree that it was the right thing to do, but maybe you will agree that I had a good reason to do it. So my story starts back when I was a young boy. My older brother Trevor was a bit of a rotten kid. He would constantly get into fights at school and get awful grades, but our parents constantly just made excuses for him. Yeah, he stole from the grocery store, but boys will be boys. I'm sure he feels sorry for it. It didn't matter how much trouble he got into. My parents just thought that Trevor was the best kid in existence, even when he broke our neighbor's son's arm. They just made excuses for him and brushed it off.
Listen, my Trevor is a good boy. He would never attack someone unless they provoked him. Your son must have said or done something to deserve what happened to him.
It was so infuriating. They would treat him like everything that he did was right and that there was nothing that he could do that they would be upset with. Even when he stole their car when he was only 13, they still only made him promise not to do it again. And then 1 month later, when he did, only this time, he crashed the car into several of our neighbors' cars. For the first time in Trevor's life, our parents yelled at him, and they promised that he would pay for all the damage that he had done. However, the second they got him home, they apologized for their harsh words and didn't even ground him. They even lied to the neighbors and told them that he had paid for the damages even though they had eaten the bill themselves. It all changed, though, when Trevor got sick. At first, the doctors couldn't figure out what was causing his illness, but he was always tired and nauseous. It was so bad that even walking up a single flight of stairs was too much for him, and he could barely keep anything down. He began to lose a lot of weight, and he looked terrible. But suddenly, the doctors found a cure, but there was a catch. It would cost a lot of money, but my parents happily paid, and within a few months, Trevor was feeling like himself again. He even began to torment me again. Part of me was happy that he was doing better, but I really wished that he had used the experience to become a better person. Instead, it only made him feel even more untouchable. He even began stealing my things, like my iPad or my video games. Our parents always just told us to figure things out and that I needed to just let him be. After all, he had narrowly avoided death and that he just needed some space to figure things out. I was just so done with all their excuses. A couple years later, though, is when I really began to understand how toxic my family was, though. After seeing how much my brother had suffered, I had decided that I wanted to become a therapist. Part of me was fascinated how Trevor always managed to avoid accountability, and I wanted to help other people grow up to not be like him. At any rate, I told my parents my idea. So, I have decided that I will be a therapist when I grow up. I know that it's expensive, but I'll be able to help lots of people. And I know that you've been saving money for Trevor and I to go to school, so that will help out a lot. Well, you see, the thing is, we had to spend the money that we had been saving for your school on the procedure to save Trevor's life. Wait a minute, what?
Yeah, it was really expensive.
Well, I guess it was for a good reason. But when were you going to tell Trevor and I that we had no college funds? Oh, Trevor still has one. We only spent yours on his treatment. I could not believe what I was hearing. You spent mine, but not Trevor's.
Well, yeah, he has such amazing potential.
And what about me? Honestly, we just figured that you would end up working some dead-end minimum wage job, whereas Trevor is going to be somebody important one day. This is nonsense. Why can't you just split Trevor's college fund in two and we can share it? It will at least make college a lot more affordable.
Sorry, Kevin, but we can't do that to Trevor. That would be incredibly unfair to him.
Unfair to him? How is that not unfair to me? You basically stole my money, and you didn't even have the courage to tell me. I knew that it was useless to say anything else, and so I stormed off to my room and I started making plans for how I was going to still afford school. I had the grades, but paying for it was going to be a challenge. After making a budge, I got myself 2 part-time jobs, and I started working every shift that I could. It took a while, but I saved up enough that my first 2 years of school were paid for, and I applied and was accepted. I didn't even tell my parents that I was leaving for school. I merely packed up all my belongings and put most of my things in a storage locker while I brought what I needed to school. I wasn't the least bit surprised when they didn't contact me and ask where I was, or even if I was okay, which only made me realize that they were truly awful people and that I was better off without them in my life. It took quite a few years, but I graduated, and although I worked a lot of hours, I still ended up with a good chunk of student loans. But once I started working in my field, it was all worth it. Not to mention that I was making good money, and it wouldn't take too long for me to pay off my loans. Not long after I opened my own practice, did I get a call from my parents. How they had found I couldn't say, but they wanted to know if I could come over for dinner one night. Part of me was skeptical and more than a little suspicious about the whole thing, but considering how much I had accomplished and the years that had passed, I figured that it was time to at least see if we could mend the broken relationship that had grown from when I was younger. The night that I went over, my parents greeted me at the door. They looked terrible. Their eyes were sunken and they looked like they were ready to fall asleep at any second. Once they let me inside, Trevor greeted me next. He was sitting in a wheelchair and he also looked very sickly and weak. "Hey Kevin, so we heard that you were doing really well, that you have your own practice even." "Yeah, it took a lot of effort, but yes, I am doing well."
That's wonderful. We're very proud of you.
I would be lying if that didn't feel really good to hear. I had a feeling that there was an ulterior motive for asking me over, but for a brief moment, I was just happy that my family was proud of me. It didn't take long for them to ruin it though. "So since you are doing so well, we were wondering if you could help us out." "Okay, here it comes." "What is it?"
Well, it's Trevor's illness. It's back again. We need money for another treatment for him.
"Why not use his college fund? It's clear that he won't need it now."
We did. After you left, we were forced to start working multiple jobs, and even with his college fund, we barely are able to make enough to pay all of our bills.
"And how is that my problem?" "Because we're family and we really need you." "Well, that's just it. You may need me, but I 100% do not need any of you. If you don't help us, we will disown you." And just like that, I turned and left. It was no use in staying. Nothing had changed after all. As it turned out, they had indeed been forced to work crazy hours and use Trevor's college fund to pay for another round of treatment. After he had felt well again, he went for another joyride and had stolen a car and totaled it. The legal fees and fines were massive, and our parents once again paid for everything. Then when his illness returned yet again, they had to struggle to pay for his treatment. My parents ended up selling one of their cars and much of their belongings. Now they were desperate. They had nothing left to give up to cover the expense, and so they had turned to me. However, there was no way that I was going to give them a dime. After years of being treated like a burden to them, I had finally found a place in this world for me, and they wanted to take that away and help Trevor, who constantly just proved himself to be a menace to the world. After that day, my parents kept calling me constantly to beg for the money until I blocked their numbers. I had no interest in helping them, but as it turned out, they resorted to begging the community for the money and started a GoFundMe. It raised more than enough money for the treatment, and Trevor was once again healed. With the extra money, Trevor used it to buy drugs and prostitutes, and while he was celebrating, he drove our parents' car drunk and crashed it into a police cruiser and was then arrested. He is currently in prison and is serving a 10-year term, but something tells me that his illness will return, and he will no doubt either die in prison or he might be let out because of it. Either way, I doubt that the community will come to his rescue the next time that his illness returns. And honestly, I say good riddance. So there you have it. Do you think my denying my family was greedy, but at the very least that it was justified? Was I wrong not to help them out, even with knowing that by doing so, that I'm only enabling Trevor to continue to be a horrible person? Please let me know what you think in the comment section.